Drones, which are used to destroy individual objects in Crimea and the Russian Federation, are not enough to destroy the Crimean Bridge. Missiles with concrete piercing warheads are needed, such as some modifications of ATACMS and Taurus, which Ukraine has not yet received. This was reported in the chat on Glavred by military political observer of the information resistance group Alexander Kovalenko. He noted that it is not yet known whether such warheads are being developed for the Ukrainian R-360 Neptune anti-ship missile, since there is little information about the new type of these missiles. However, a significant number of cruise or ballistic missiles with special concrete piercing warheads are required to destroy the Crimean Bridge. We can terrorize the Crimean Bridge with drones, but what effect? It is much more effective not to terrorize the Crimean Bridge, having no efficiency factor, but to hit Russian oil refineries, which will burn for several days or even weeks in a row, which will have a moral and psychological effect on Russians, make us happy, and in addition will also have a practical effect, the analyst points out. Kovalenko also emphasized that strikes on oil refineries and oil depots significantly complicate the enemy's logistics. Even if fuel tanks do not catch fire but are only located near the source, their contents become unusable. Thus, strikes on such objects have a significant practical effect, and the Crimean Bridge is waiting for missiles. Precisely missiles. He summed up. Recall that, as previously reported, Ukrainian unmanned systems controlled by the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine carried out strikes on military facilities in the temporarily occupied Crimea. The targets of the attacks were Russian radar stations, air defense systems, sea vessels, and even a helicopter. In particular, the reconnaissance aircraft destroyed a helicopter, the ship Fedor Uryupin, and more than 10 radars. According to the main intelligence directorate, on March the 19th, Russian air defense systems were unable to effectively counterattack the precise strikes of the Russian forces. In addition, on the night of February the 26th, occupied Crimea was subjected to a massive attack by attack drones. Explosions thundered in different areas of the peninsula, and Russian air defense tried to repel the attack. This was reported by the Telegram channel Krymsky Vita and the Kremlin-appointed governor of Sevastopol, Mikhail Razvozeyev. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenski has announced a meeting at the level of General Staff representatives in Ukraine to discuss the future deployment of a military contingent. Zelensky said that Ukraine reached an agreement with its partners to hold this military-level meeting during the summit of the Coalition of the Willing in Paris. We agreed urgently, within a week, to hold a meeting in Ukraine with a select group of General Staff representatives from key countries that are fully prepared for a contingent on Ukrainian territory, he added. The president did not specify who exactly would participate at the meeting, but confirmed that representatives from France, the United Kingdom, and Ukraine would be present. So EU and Britain continue to discuss the possible deployment of their contingents in Ukraine under the guise of peacekeeping. Countries located many thousands of kilometers from Ukraine, Canada, and Australia have now joined this topic. Russian media says that the possibility of sending their troops is most zealously discussed in Paris and London, which sometimes causes considerable surprise, even among their own military personnel. At the same time, Macron, Starmer, and others from the Coalition of the Willing are still trying to enlist support from the US, in the sense that Washington would cover their contingents in Ukraine with its own forces and resources, as if within the framework of Article 5 of the NATO Charter. The US administration has repeatedly said it's business, which translated into plain language means yours, gentlemen, yourselves. Now Macron and Starmer are trying to understand what could be in the Russian-American deal. will there be a place for them in Ukraine, and in such a way that Russian troops will not attack them? Considering the demands voiced by Russian troops on numerous occasions, including the withdrawal of the Ukrainian armed forces beyond the borders of 4 new regions, it is quite obvious that there cannot be any Western troops on the territory of these regions. Russian media says that if French and British troops try to enter Donbass and the Novorossiya regions, like Kherson and Zaporizhia, then there cannot be any legal ban on strikes against them for the Russian armed forces in principle. The coalition of the willing wants the Russian armed forces not to strike their contingents if they are deployed, for example, in Odessa and Ochakov. In the Belgorod region, the Ukrainian armed forces are very actively using drones, not allowing the Russian army to even show its face. One of the most popular Z-War correspondents in the Russian Federation, Filatov, spoke frankly about this, Dialogue.ua reports. There are several hundred FPV hits per day in the Belgorod region. Surprising? No. The Ukrainians openly said that 1 million drones was the goal for the year. It is likely that they exceeded it. The propagandist wrote. He specified that FPV drone strikes in the Pokrovsky direction are not in the hundreds, but in the thousands. The Russian army is lagging far behind in this matter. We have an acute shortage of FPV. The list and nomenclature are extremely meager. The number of damaged vehicles on the roads is growing, Filatov wrote. He also complained about the chaos in the management of the Russian armed forces. According to him, the problems are in logistics, electronic warfare, mining, etc. You get closer to the front and it begins. Chaotic mining, lack of understanding of who is who and what he is doing here. The sky is behind the enemy and many other illogical things. Driving along the road is like a fun game of Russian roulette, wrote Z-War correspondent. Recently, Ukraine's Air Force struck the Poga border checkpoint in Russia's Bryansk Oblast, destroying its military infrastructure and killing dozens of Russian troops. The General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces reported, Ukraine has repeatedly recorded drone launches from the area of the Poga checkpoint, and its destruction reduces Russia's ability to threaten Ukrainian forces in the Sumy and Kursk oblasts, according to the statement. As a result of the attack, the military infrastructure of the checkpoint was destroyed, along with means of communication and electronic warfare, as well as video surveillance system and other technical means, the General Staff said. Between 15 and 40 Russian soldiers were reportedly killed in the strike. The Poga checkpoint lies close to the village of Sluchovsk, just across the border with Ukraine's northeastern Chernihiv Oblast. This airstrike was a response to cynical actions of the Russian military, which continues terror against Ukraine by daily launching dozens of strike drones into populated areas, destroying civilian infrastructure and residential buildings, and killing peaceful Ukrainian citizens. The statement read,